one of peace. Take our minds and think with them. Take our lips and speak with them. Take our hands and work with them. And take our hearts and set them on fire with love for you and all of creation. Amen. First impressions matter. I can remember some of the first impressions that you've had of people that you then became in relationship with later in life. Sometimes those first impressions are accurate, sometimes they're way off. I debated carefully sharing this next story, but since my spouse is away today, I thought it was fair game to go ahead and share the first impressions that Becky had of me and I had of her. We met on an ultimate frisbee team some 16 years ago this fall, and soon thereafter discovered we were both going to Boston University for grad school, she journalism, me theology, divinity. And when I first courageously got up the gusto to go and talk with her at one of those frisbee games, I remember I saw that she had been subbed out, so I suddenly became a little tired on the field and subbed myself out to stand next to her. And the conversation went something like, "Good game, hey?" Yes. We're doing pretty good out there. Our defense is pretty good, right? Yes. Your name's Becky, right? Yes. I hear you go to BU. I go to BU too. Oh. My first impressions of Becky were that she was either not very talkative, which is the one I chose to claim, or that she had no interest in talking to me. My first impressions of Becky were that of some type of Jesus freak wearing a coconut cross around my neck and talking about seminary, which she thought was where priests went, and wanting to live someday in a yurt, and she, for some reason, thought I had a southern accent. Most of these I don't think were true. I still would love to live in a yurt someday. Friends, first impressions, they matter. The first impressions of the risen Jesus matter. In today's gospel reading, read so well by Melissa this morning from the chapter 20th of John's gospel, we join the disciples as they first encounter the risen one post-empty tomb. And before we delve into this a little, let's recall that it's not the first encounter with the risen sovereign in John's gospel. For we remember the disciples were hiding away scared for their lives that day, but earlier that morning it was Mary of Magdala who rises early and first goes to the tomb. After finding it empty, she goes and tells Peter, the beloved disciple, and they race also to the tomb. But once they find it empty, they go back to that locked room. But Mary stays. She stays in the garden, and there encounters what her first impressions tell her is a gardener. Soon then, this gardener names her Mary, and she sees who it truly is, the risen Jesus. And so begins now today's reading from the 20th chapter. Right off the bat, our story reads like a John Grisham novel. For fear of the authorities, they are locked away in a room. And it makes good sense. We remember their leader and friend had just been arrested and executed as a seditionist, as a terrorist of the state, and they feared for their lives. We can imagine they were probably doing exactly what they should have been doing, locking themselves up behind a big barrier. But suddenly, Liberator Jesus shows up right in their midst, despite the barred door, despite the walls. And their first impression of the risen one catches them completely off guard and in a state of fear and self-preservation. The first words then come out of Christ's mouth. Peace be with you. Shalom Aleichem in Aramaic, Jesus' language. Also in Hebrew, it sounds very similar to Salaam Alaikum in Arabic. We know those two languages, Semitic cousins. Peace. And just as Mary is named and then recognizes Jesus, so too the disciples, when they hear the word peace, recognize their Rabboni, Jesus. Recall, though, how this peace is a different type of peace. Earlier in John chapter 14, Jesus tells his friends, "Peace I leave you, my peace I give to you. I do not give as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. The ruler of this world is coming. He has no power over me. Let us rise and be on our way. So what does this Jesus peace mean? It certainly could have been used to calm the frenetically fearful friends of Jesus in that locked room. But it also is calling them to recognize a different type of peace that God is all about. A peace that overturns tables of expectation. Not a tranquil peace or one of tranquility, but one of equity. The rulers of this world that seek power over people have no power over this kind of peace. Peace be with you is therefore a radical claim of liberation. Nothing can come between us. No doors, no walls, not even death. A favorite Tizay chant of mine is, nothing can ever come between us and the love of God revealed to us in Christ Jesus. Peace be with you. Nothing can come between us. We say that at the very beginning of every time we gather as a community, as part of the body of Christ. It's the very first thing we say, because it is a radical affirmation of God's presence and liberation. A world needs more of this Jesus peace these days. Jesus peace does not send National Guard troops with guns to a border. Jesus peace sends hundreds together here in Quincy yesterday for the Massachusetts Poor People campaign. There in that beautiful multicultural gathering, we heard about people who also went to that border in Arizona, but went there not to build a wall, but to prophetically call it out as sin, with a Joshua at Jericho-like prophetic voice. Jesus' peace reminds us that God takes sides. God always sides with the poor, with the shut out, the locked out, and no barrier is too high for the embodied and rising love of God. Yesterday's meeting of the Poor People's Campaign reminded me of maybe what it might have looked like 50 years ago during the original Poor People's Campaign in the Civil Rights era. That gathering was economically diverse, culturally, ethnically diverse, and it was adorned with art around the walls of that space were posters and banners. It reminded me of all the banners that were held years ago. One raised high this message: we are a new unsettling force for liberation. We have nothing to lose but our chains. And then rose the Pretty Good People's Choir, that's what they called themselves, the Pretty Good People's Choir, with violin, sax, guitars, and amazing gospel voices, singing, "Somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Shalom Aleichem. May God be with you, may peace be with you, but may you be whole and complete." The Aramaic of Jesus here is much more inclusive than being against war or being for tranquility. This is a type of completion and wholeness, a peace that is not without scars, not without pain, not without the human condition. That's why we give thanks to God for Thomas in today's story, who reminds us that scars are a part of God. Only in recognizing the scars, only by touching the risen one where the risen one was wounded, does Thomas recognize Jesus. Friends, being together as church in this frenetic world often leads to scars. It often leads to wounds. We face illness, we face challenges, we face defeat, we face powers that seem insurmountable. But today's gospel reading reminds us that God is present in all things. Before this worship service, many of us gathered upstairs in a chapel space to have a different type of worship service of solidarity and love and prayer for a former pastor of this church, Jennifer Weckner-McNally, who is going through a very difficult diagnosis of cancer right now. We recognize the truth of scars in our world, the truth of illness, but we recognize more powerfully the truth of God's presence. When Jennifer was here in 2012, on her last Sunday with you all, the Sunday before I was here, on February 4th, 2012, she preached a sermon called Pulling Together. And she wrote this: "These individual yokes are a big part of our lives. Jesus reinforces this idea that there is rest, comfort, and joy in following God as Jesus' disciple. He encourages those who are overwhelmed and exhausted by their lives to follow. God's way is not a life of inactivity, but rest that alternates with a different kind of activity, like healthy exercise that leaves us temporarily tired, but stronger and more energized than we've been before." Jennifer reminds us of the call to rest. Sometimes wounds and scars cause us to rest. Sometimes joy causes us to rest. Jennifer, thank you for teaching us still about the ways of seeking God and embodying God in the midst of living. Our prayers and love continue to be with you. You point, Jennifer, you point John's Gospel, you point the risen Jesus to the reality of lightness in our journey of faith, to the truth of rest. Last week on Easter night on NBC, you may have caught John Legend, Brandon Victor Dixon, and Sarah Bareilles as they together performed Jesus Christ Superstar. I hope this choir saw that. All right, if you hadn't, go watch it again. An incredible production of that great musical. And in that we heard the words, "Everything's all right, everything is fine, and we want you to sleep well tonight. Let the world turn without you tonight." Sarah/Mary Magdalene sings this to Jesus. "Let the world turn without you tonight." In her saying this to Jesus, she's affirming the deep understanding of Shalom and Sabbath. When people greet one another in the Jewish tradition, it is on the weekend, and on the Sabbath, it is Shabbat Shalom. Again, it is that understanding of peace and peace be with you, but it is much deeper than that. It is, may you dwell in completeness on this seventh day. May you dwell in completeness on this seventh day. God rested. God then commanded the early community of followers of Miriam and Moses to rest every 6 days on the seventh, but also every 6 years on the seventh year, to let your animals rest, to let your fields rest, and for you to take rest. For rest is a part of recognizing that God dwells in you, you dwell in God, and you are complete. In your scars, in your joys, you are complete. And if we frenetically move too fast through the world, we may forget this reality. And not all of us are given the tremendous gift of 3 months sabbatical leave, like I am faced with. And from the bottom of my heart, I thank this congregation for that biblical tradition of letting those who help guide and serve alongside you as a community to take some months off every 6 years to refocus and find spiritual stability. And I pledge to you that I will do my best to seek that stability with my family, with the landscapes that will inspire me. We are going through the theme of a Celtic family way as we gather together, Becky Rowan and I, in various landscapes that speak to us of the truths of God's image, not just within each and every one of us, but within the rocks and the trees and the ocean and the breeze. I'm grateful for a chance to follow more intently John's gospel, that favorite gospel of the Celtics, because of that reality of God being in the world as the Word. As we do that, I will be remembering you. Not everyone, as I said, has a chance to take months off. I'm grateful specifically to Julie for helping to make this possible, to Ashley for making this possible, to all of you who will make this possible for me. But I pray during my leave that you would also have a leave where you dwell in the completeness of God's presence in you, that you dwell in shalom, that you dwell in peace, remembering that whatever comes in life's varied capacity, whatever comes to you in each rising of the sun, that you remember that you are complete and that you are whole, and that God's very image rests in you and with you. First impressions matter. I'm grateful that we got to meet Ashley today and commission her. Hope and pray that those first impressions are empowering to all of you as you continue in a new season of contemplation, of reflection, and of active ministry in this place. Today we will get to see a new impression of Elliot Allen Craig, who is to be baptized today, as we are refreshed, all of us, in that reality that God's image is in each and every one of us. So go forth from this place remembering that impressions matter, so that how you are in the world matters, but also peace is our liberation refrain. Peace, Salaam, Shalom. We'll now turn to that song, that great anthem that was written by Emma's Revolution about 20 years ago, I think. This was a song written in response to 9/11, and it is a song that speaks of not only our need for peace in our world, but that deep affirmation that liberation is in our hearts as the very image of God is in our hearts. We will sing as is printed now in our